Among the Sanshayum, there are a few individuals who are not pretentious, power-hungry manipulators. Two of the hierarchs, Truth and Regret, emphasize these repulsive traits wonderfully. But among those few who are not totally devoid of integrity, the Prophet of Clarity, Zo Resken, stands out. He lived during the time of the Great Schism in 2552, and served for a short while as an aide to the High Prophet of Truth. He was also a descendant of a high-ranking Sanshayum from the early ages of the Covenant, the Prophet of Inner Conviction, who was known for his great deeds before and within the Covenant. Clarity and Inner Conviction shared a zeal for recording history, culture, and researching ancient relics, especially, to the surprise of none, Forerunner relics. Before his assignment to be the High Prophet of Truth's secondary administrator, Zo Resken had been in charge of directing combat squads, predominantly elites. He had even commanded squads of elites during the battle for Alpha Halo, and had helped some of them escape before the ring was destroyed. Zo had developed a rapport with Sanghili. In fact, a few of them became his closest companions, notably a commander named Gatorik Clemi and a high counselor named Torg Gransami. The story of Zo Resken really begins after the Prophet of Regret had perished at the hands of the Master Chief, and word had reached High Charity about the Prophet of Truth's questionable actions in providing timely support to the deceased hierarch. Clarity met with the aforementioned Sanghili to cautiously discuss recent events, and at the end of their conversation, he agreed to relate to them if there were anything he learned about the Prophet of Truth's machinations. And Zo also had his own ambitions. Maybe one day he might become a hierarch? There was an empty seat, after all. But he was saddened at the death of the Prophet of Regret, someone who had treated him kindly. Clarity took advantage of an immediate opportunity as he was summoned by Truth for a meeting between the High Prophet and Tartarus, as well as the Prophet of Exquisite Devotion, an individual that Clarity loathed. Zo Resken's purpose in this meeting was merely to greet and provide refreshments for the Brute Chieftain and Exquisite Devotion. But Zo had something else in mind. He had used his knowledge from serving as a communications officer to install a listening device in Truth's chair. But before the High Prophet's visitors arrived, Clarity was informed that he was going to become an assistant to the Prophet of Exquisite Devotion. He was quite disappointed. The private meeting between the two Sanshayum and Tartarus went without interruption, nor did they know that they were being eavesdropped, and Clarity listened to what were significant, smug allusions to the changing of the honor guard, Sanghili for Jiral Hanai. Clarity was rattled. And these allusions were later confirmed by Exquisite Devotion, who informed him of the plan to relegate the Sanghili to a lower class within Covenant society, also stating that he didn't want the Prophet of Clarity to be surprised by the change when it happened. Zo quickly met with Gatorik to advise him of these unprecedented developments. It happened afterward that Zo was plodding along one of the hanging gardens in High Charity, attempting to walk on his own, free from the assistance of a levitating chair or his anti-grav belt. Sanshayum physiology had deteriorated over the years since the departure of the Reformists from their homeworld, Janjur Kham. He heard the Prophet of Truth's voice announcing the changes within the Covenant.
With my blessing, the brutes now lead our fleets.
And though he didn't know it, this was the beginning of the Great Schism. And that was when two brutes harshly interrupted him with a summons from the Prophet of Exquisite Devotion. He was allowed to bring his chair, however. They brought him to a weapons experimentation facility known as the Trial Court, where Exquisite Devotion awaited him. The Prophet had 3 former Sanghili High Counselors detained in a room meant for testing a new gravity manipulation device. He proceeded to torture one of them in front of Clarity, simply to demonstrate the device's ability to totally crush objects or persons, or parts of persons, with gravitational force. Exquisite revealed that Gatorik had been monitored secretly, and that he was heard retelling information about the then imminent changing of the guard. And in fact, that was the reason why Zo first had been told, to test the Prophet's allegiances, to see if he would leak. He also told him that the High Counselors who had gathered in Delta Halo's control room for the consecration of the Index, the sacred icon, had been killed, and Gatorik, who had fought with his brethren against their murderers, was both deemed a heretic and also missing. Furthermore, Exquisite believed that Zo had some connection to the Arbiter, and wanted to know his location and the strength of his forces, though of course Zo knew nothing about either. But Exquisite did not believe him, and finished what he had started with one of the captive Sanghili, by completely pulverizing his body. Here, we see the greatest test of Zo Resken's character. The Prophet of Exquisite Devotion offered him a chance to confirm his loyalty to the Covenant, to the High Prophet of Truth, by killing one of the elites. If he refused, he would suffer the same excruciating death as the Sangheli. But he could not bring himself to do it, even to save his own life. So he was sent to be executed. On his way to the gravity chamber, however, Zo was rescued by none other than Gatoric Clemi, along with a commander known as Krun Brinsme and a young Sangheli engineering officer named Tul Imjanami. Their escape route went through a maintenance chamber filled with energy conduits and converging pipes. But their exit at the end of the room had been knocked down, and they were soon followed by a pair of hunters and Exquisite Devotion himself, who gave the elites an ultimatum: release Clarity, or be annihilated with him. Their reply was to open fire on Exquisite, though not seriously expecting to break the personal energy shields provided by his anti-grav chair. The hunters opened fire, and in the ensuing chaos, Zo's face was burned by one of the energy blasts. But the elites were able to destroy the hunters by shooting energy transmutation cubes, which flanked the hunter pair to either side, thus eradicating the Megalith Golo in a large explosion. Exquisite Devotion was flung from his chair by the blast, which Gatoric promptly took advantage of by dismembering the vulnerable Sanshayum with his energy sword. All three elites and Zo were able to escape the energy conduit chamber, which was now unstable and likely to produce a very sizable explosion with the help of an engineer. They made their way to an awaiting transport, a small repair ship. They escaped High Charity, but not before witnessing the departure of the Forerunner Dreadnought from its ancient seat at the center of High Charity. This was a shocking sight for all of them. When they had reached the outside of High Charity's dome, they made their way to a larger vessel, the Journey's Sustenance, which carried them out of system. The ship made a slipspace jump to a region of space marked as forbidden by the Covenant, the Usan system. Zo knew of the legendary Usa Zealous, who had led a small group of Sangheli dissenters to the early Covenant and hid with them on a shield world in this very system. Zo's ancestor, the Prophet of Inner Conviction, had led a fleet to eliminate these rebels, but Usa Zealous seemingly destroyed the shield world, leaving nothing behind but rubble. In his secret memoirs, Conviction wrote that he thought he glimpsed some kind of non-random movement in the debris, but decided to ignore it. Oh, and Zo's face wasn't terribly disfigured by the burn he had received, so there's that too. Zo was able to convince his Sangheli companions to begin a search for Forerunner relics, and more importantly, to find, if it existed, the lost Usan colony. The search lasted for a few months at least. Toward the end of their barren investigations, they received word about the end of the Great Schism, the Arbiter's victory, the deactivation of the Halo Rings, the alliance with the humans, and the truth about the fate of the Forerunners. Zo and the others were on the verge of giving up, before a breakthrough was finally made. Obscured though it was by its place in the system's asteroid belt, the Usan colony was sighted by the Journey's Sustenance. As their ship moved closer to the odd metallic structure that was the Usan refuge, they noticed a battle being waged there, and an unusual spider-like maintenance ship drifting in space. Though the craft was severely damaged, they caught it in their freight hold, and upon personal inspection, it yielded a pilot. Their first contact with an Usan Sangheli named Vornik Gred. Though initial communication was awkward, they were able to exchange names, places of origin, and confirm that the structure floating in space was indeed the lost colony. Zo was eager to discover all that he could about the colony and its history, but not before helping to repair the damage done to the refuge by vast ages and an ongoing strife. And for these problems, they would need their engineer. Once they entered the colony, with Vornik's assistance, the first thing they had the engineer repair was the damaged monitor of the refuge, Enduring Bias. This enabled a sequence of events to occur, including victory for the faction of Usans who held to Kaiden Baltol Zealous, descendant of Usa Zealous, against those who were under the control of a Sangheli insurgent named Kinsa. Many of the Sangheli were infected with a disease called blood sickness, which was due to a malfunctioning food synthesizer. The Huragok repaired this device too, and he and Enduring Bias developed a cure to distribute for those infected by the disease. Once all of the insurgents had either laid down their arms or been killed, Enduring Bias activated a process which would bring together the remaining pieces of the refuge, which had been shattered so long ago. The fragments connected to each other to form a complete circle, a complete home. Despite Zo's sadness because of his belief that he may well have been the last Sanshayum, and that he likely would have no heirs, he was not entirely downcast. "Ah," said Zo Resken, "what will I do? I have no real home. But what do I have here? A treasure trove, a glorious repository of scarcely understood Forerunner history. Who knows what other secrets wait here to be unfolded? If it is permitted me, I will remain. I submit to the will of the Kaidan. It is permitted, said Baltol. You brought our salvation to us. It would be an honor to have you remain here. And this, until further lore reveals, is where Zo Resken's story ends. I hope you all enjoyed this lore video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Also comment down below if there's an area of the Halo universe that you'd like me to cover next. Until next time.